You clicked because you can already picture it. The teak deck under your bare feet, the sun going down over an anchorage nobody else found. A boat that finally makes the last 20 years of work mean something. I sell boats for a living. And I'm going to tell you why you shouldn't buy one. Here's what my inspections keep proving. The number on the listing is almost never the number you actually pay. On the boats I walk, the real first-year cost runs 2 to 3 times the sticker, and most buyers never see it coming until the money is already gone. I found that out the hard way, standing in a boatyard in Deltaville, Virginia, running my thumb along the hull of a gorgeous 40-foot cruiser while blisters the size of quarters crackled under my nail like bubble wrap. Stay with me, because there's a documented flaw in a specific run of boats built between 1976 and 1981 that turned one of the most respected ocean-going hulls in America into a cautionary tale. And there's a free, public record almost no first-time buyer knows exists that would have exposed every one of these problems before a single dollar changed hands. Let me show you what I found. Let's start with a lie you've already been told, and it's not even a malicious one at first. It's the price. You see a cruising sailboat listed at $50,000, and your brain files that as the cost. $50,000. You've got that, or you can get that, and suddenly the dream feels touchable. But that number is not the cost of the boat. That number is the cost of being allowed to start spending money on the boat. I've tracked the real first-year spend on dozens of used cruisers in the 35 to 45-foot range, the size most people want for real ocean passages, and the pattern is brutally consistent. Before that boat is genuinely ready to leave the dock and keep you safe, you are almost always into it for another $30,000 to $60,000 on top of the purchase price. Let me break down where it goes, because this is the part nobody itemizes for you. The haul out alone, just lifting the boat out of the water on a travel lift so someone can look at the bottom, runs between $15 and $25 per foot at most yards I deal with. On a 40-footer, that's the better part of $1,000 before anyone has touched a single thing. Then there's the survey, which you absolutely must pay for yourself, and a proper one on a 40-foot boat runs $800 to $1,500. Then comes the bottom. If that hull needs new anti-fouling paint, and used boats almost always do, you're looking at $1,500 to $3,000 for a decent bottom job, if the previous owner let it go, and there are old failing layers of paint that have to be stripped down to bare gel coat, a process called a soda blast or a peel. That single job can hit $5,000 to $8,000 on its own. Now here's where the tension starts, because I haven't even gotten to the systems yet. The sails, the rigging, the engine, the electronics. Every one of those is a separate financial event, and every one of them is aging on a clock the seller is praying you don't understand. So the $50,000 boat isn't a $50,000 boat. It's a $50,000 entry fee into a game where the real bills haven't even been dealt yet. But the money isn't even the scary part. The scary part is what's hiding inside the one thing you assumed was solid, the hull itself. Here's a belief that costs people their entire budget. They think fiberglass is forever. Fiberglass doesn't rust like steel, and it doesn't rot like wood. So the assumption is that the hull, the actual body of the boat, is the one thing you don't have to worry about. That assumption has bankrupted more first-time buyers than any other single mistake I've watched unfold. Let me tell you about a boat that should have been perfect, the Valiant 40. If you read the sailing magazines from the era, this was the boat. Designed by Robert Perry, one of the most respected naval architects in cruising history, it was built to cross oceans, and it earned that reputation honestly. Sailors loved it. It won awards. It's on nearly every list of great blue water cruisers ever written, and a specific run of them is quietly rotting from the outside in. Here's the documented case, and this is the part that reads like evidence, because it is. The early Valiants were built by a company called Uniflight, and somewhere in the production years between roughly 1976 and 1981, the builder used a fire-retardant polyester resin in the hull layup. That resin, over years of sitting in water, developed severe osmotic blistering, not cosmetic, not surface, deep, structural, weeping blisters across the hull, in one of the most celebrated ocean cruisers ever made. Think about what that means. A buyer sees Valiant 40 on a listing, he sees Robert Perry, he sees the blue water pedigree, the magazine reviews, the reputation, he thinks he's buying safety. And if that specific hull came out of those specific years, he might be buying a fiberglass sponge that needs a hull peel costing $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 to make right. Now, I'm not telling you every Valiant is bad. I'm telling you the exact opposite of the lesson people take from reputation. The name on the transom is not the evidence. The build year and the builder are the evidence. Same designer, same model, same beautiful lines, and one hull is a treasure while another is a project that will eat your retirement. This is what osmotic blistering actually is, so you can hunt for it yourself. Water molecules migrate through the gel coat, the hard outer skin of the hull, and react with chemicals trapped in the fiberglass laminate underneath. That reaction creates an acidic fluid, and that fluid creates pressure, and that pressure pushes out into a blister. When you pop one, and I've popped hundreds, it smells like vinegar, and it weeps a sticky fluid. That smell is a confession. It tells you the water has been in the laminate a long time. A handful of small blisters is often manageable and normal for an older boat. A hull covered in them, or a hull that's already had a botched blister repair the seller conveniently didn't mention, is a five-figure problem hiding under a fresh coat of paint. And that fresh coat of paint is exactly the point, because now we have to talk about who benefits when you don't know what you're looking at. Because here's the uncomfortable truth I've been circling. Somebody made money on the fact that you couldn't see what I just showed you. When a boat with a known blister history gets a fresh bottom job right before it goes on the market, that is not always a coincidence. A fresh coat of anti-fouling paint hides the hull's entire history. It covers old blister grinds, it covers repairs, it makes a tired hull photograph beautifully. And the buyer, standing in the yard admiring how clean the bottom looks, reads that fresh paint as care when sometimes it's camouflage. I'm not telling you every fresh bottom job is a cover-up. Plenty of honest sellers paint the bottom because it needed paint. But I am telling you that it was just hauled and painted, she's all ready to go, is the exact phrase that should make you slow down, not speed up. Ready for you to see, not necessarily ready for the ocean. So how do you fight back when the evidence has been painted over? You bring a moisture meter, or you hire a surveyor who does. A moisture meter reads how much water is trapped in the laminate under that pretty paint, and it does not care how clean the bottom looks. A hull that reads soaking wet under fresh paint is telling you a story the seller didn't. That's the difference between a buyer who investigates and a buyer who admires. One walks away whole. The other spends the next 2 years writing checks to a boatyard. But even a dry, solid hull can hurt you, because the most dangerous failures on a cruising sailboat aren't in the part that touches the water. They're in the parts holding up the thing that makes it a sailboat at all. Let me ask you something. When you picture that boat, are you picturing the mast? Because the mast is trying to fall down, and almost nobody checks the two things holding it up. The mast on a cruising sailboat is held upright by standing rigging, the steel wires running from the top of the mast down to the sides and front and back of the boat. Those wires are under enormous, constant tension, day and night, whether you're sailing or sitting at the dock, and they have a lifespan. Here's the number the lifestyle crowd never puts in the pretty sunset videos. Marine riggers and insurance underwriters generally consider standing rigging to have a service life of about 10 to 15 years, or roughly a certain number of hard offshore miles, whichever comes first. Some insurers now flat out require you to replace rigging older than a certain age before they'll cover the boat offshore. So you buy a 1990 cruiser with the original rigging still on it. It looks fine. Steel wire doesn't look old the way a frayed rope does. But that rigging could be 3 decades past its intended service life, work hardening and cracking from the inside where you cannot see it. And a full standing rigging replacement on a 40-foot boat runs, in my experience, from around $8,000 on the low end to well over $20,000 if the mast has to come down and specialized fittings are involved. That's a car. That's a wire fence between you and a dismasting in the middle of the ocean, and it's a wire fence with an expiration date most buyers never ask about. Now here's the part that genuinely keeps me up. It's not the wire that usually fails first. It's the chain plates. Chain plates are the metal straps that anchor the rigging to the actual structure of the boat. They're often buried, hidden behind interior panels, glassed into the hull, or bolted through the deck. And because they're hidden, they're the single most ignored failure point on a used cruiser. Water works its way down along a chain plate over years, and stainless steel, when it's starved of oxygen in a wet, hidden crevice, does something terrifying. It suffers what's called crevice corrosion. It looks perfect on the surface and it's rotting where you can't see it. I have watched a surveyor pull one interior panel on a good-looking cruiser and expose a chain plate so corroded it flaked apart in his hand. The rigging above it was newer. The wire was fine. But the anchor point holding that entire side of the mast to the boat had the structural integrity of a stale cracker. That boat was one hard tack away from losing the rig, and the owner had no idea. Replacing chain plates means opening up the interior, sometimes cutting into cabinetry and headliner, and it can run anywhere from a few $1,000s for a simple job to well over $10,000 when the yard has to rebuild the surrounding structure. And you will almost never find a listing that says a word about them. So let's add it up, because the case is building. The purchase price, the haul out, the survey, the bottom, the possible hull blistering, the rigging on its clock, the chain plates rotting in the dark. And I still haven't mentioned the engine, but before I do, I need to talk directly to some of you, because I know who's watching right now. If you already bought the boat, don't click away. This next part is for you specifically, and it might be the most important 90 seconds in this whole video, because maybe you're sitting there right now with a knot in your stomach, doing the math on a boat that's already yours, wondering what you missed. I want to give you something you can do this weekend, without a broker, without a surveyor, without spending a dime, that will tell you more about your boat's real condition than the last person who sold it to you ever did. It's called the tap test, and every good surveyor does it, and you can do it too. Take a small plastic mallet, or even the handle of a screwdriver, and walk your deck. Tap it, section by section, and listen. A healthy, solid deck gives you a sharp, hard, high sound, a crisp knock. But when you hit a spot that's gone soft, where the core inside the deck is rotted, the sound changes completely. It goes dull, flat, like tapping a wet cardboard box. Thud instead of knock. If you want a complete breakdown of how those real bills stack up across every major system on a used cruiser, I wrote it all out in my book. True Cost covers the full first-year spending picture that listings never show you, and Deal or Drift walks you through how to decide whether a specific boat is worth pursuing or worth walking away from. Both are linked in the description below, and reading either one before you make an offer could be the most practical thing you do at this stage. Now let's get into the part that genuinely terrifies me more than any price tag, and that's what's hiding inside the one thing every buyer assumes is solid. Here's why this matters so much. Most fiberglass decks aren't solid fiberglass. They're a sandwich. Two thin layers of fiberglass with a core of balsa wood or foam in between to make them stiff and light. When water gets in through a leaking fitting, an old handrail bolt, a worn-out deck fitting, that core soaks it up and rots. And a rotted deck core is one of the most expensive repairs on the entire boat, because fixing it means cutting the deck open, digging out the wet core, and rebuilding it layer by layer. That's a 5-figure job on a large boat. So take your mallet and tap around every fitting, every stanchion base, every place a bolt goes through the deck, around the mast, around the chain plates. Listen for the thud. If you find soft spots, you haven't ruined anything. You've found the truth. And truth is the thing that lets you make a plan instead of getting blindsided. And while you're up there, put your hands on your rigging. Feel the wires near the bottom fittings for any little broken strands, what riggers call meat hooks, tiny wire splinters that catch your skin. Look for rust streaks weeping down from the fittings. Look for any hairline crack in the metal end fittings. You're not trying to become a rigger. You're trying to find out whether the thing holding your mast up is telling you a story before it tells you at sea. Do those two things, the tap test and the rigging check, and you'll know your boat better than 90% of owners know theirs. And if you find something, you found it on your terms, at the dock, for free, instead of in a gale for everything. Now, back to the engine, because for the buyers still shopping, this is where the biggest single check gets written. Here's a paradox that catches almost everyone. The sails are what make it a sailboat, but the engine is what will empty your wallet. That diesel engine tucked under the companionway steps does more than you think. It charges your batteries, it gets you in and out of tight marinas, it pushes you through windless days and against currents that would otherwise pin you in place. And a marine diesel, treated well, is a wonderful thing. Some of them run for thousands and thousands of hours. But here's what the listing means when it says runs great. It means it started in the slip. That's it. That's the whole promise. It started at the dock with no load on it, long enough for the seller to say the words. A marine diesel that has been sitting, undersized, poorly maintained, or simply worn out from decades of saltwater cooling is one of the most expensive things you can inherit. Because when a marine diesel finally goes, you don't just replace the engine. You repower, and a repower, a full replacement of the engine in a sailboat, is one of the most brutal numbers in the whole hobby. On the boats I've watched go through it, a repower on a 35 to 45 foot cruiser routinely runs from $15,000 on the low end to $25,000, $30,000, even $35,000 once you factor in the new engine. The labor to wrestle the old one out and the new one in, new engine mounts, new exhaust, new wiring, and all the little things that have to be replaced while everything's apart. Think about that against the purchase price. You could buy a $40,000 boat and discover the engine needs $30,000 of work. You didn't buy a boat, you bought half a boat and a bill. So how do you protect yourself? You never, ever accept runs great as evidence. You pay for an engine survey, which is separate from the hull survey, done by a diesel mechanic, not a general surveyor. You get the engine run hard under load, in gear, not just idling at the dock. You have the oil analyzed the same way you'd send blood to a lab, because oil analysis can reveal metal wear and coolant contamination that tells you the engine is dying before it shows any outward sign. That test costs around $30. $30 to protect yourself from a $30,000 surprise. And you check the engine hours the way you'd check the mileage on a used truck, but you check them against the calendar too. Because here's the twist. A diesel with very low hours isn't automatically good. An engine that sat unused for years, seals drying out, cylinders lightly rusting, can be in worse shape than one with high hours that ran regularly. Low hours can mean loved. Low hours can also mean neglected. The number alone doesn't tell you, the investigation does. So now the whole case is laid out in front of you. The purchase price is the entry fee. The hull can be rotting under fresh paint. The rigging is on a clock. The chainplates are corroding in the dark. The deck core can be soft as a wet box. The engine can cost more than the boat. And every single one of these is something the listing will never, ever tell you. Which brings me to the question that ties the entire investigation together. If all of this is knowable, why doesn't the buyer ever know it? Who benefits from the blind spot? And this is where I found the thing I most want you to walk away with. The one record that cracks the whole case open. Here's what took me years to understand. Every boat has a history, and that history is written down, and the seller is counting on the fact that you'll never go read it. When a seller tells you a boat's story, you're hearing one version, one owner, one angle, the good parts. But there is a paper trail on documented vessels in this country that does not care what the seller wants you to believe, and almost no first-time buyer knows it's sitting there, free, waiting to be read. It's the abstract of title, and you get it through the United States Coast Guard's Vessel Documentation System. Let me explain what this actually is, because when I first pulled one, it changed how I look at every boat. Larger boats in the United States are often federally documented with the Coast Guard instead of registered with a state, and documented vessels have a public record. Through the Coast Guard's National Vessel Documentation Center, you can look up a documented boat and, for a small fee, order its abstract of title, a document that lays out the vessel's chain of ownership and its recorded financial history. Now think about what that paper actually reveals. It shows you the ownership history. How many times has this boat changed hands? And how fast? Because a boat that's been sold 3 times in 5 years is screaming something at you. Boats that get flipped rapidly are very often problem boats, passed from owner to owner as each one discovers what the last one hid. A long, stable ownership history, one careful owner for 15 years, tells you a completely different story than a boat that couldn't stay sold. It shows you the financial record, the mortgages and liens recorded against the vessel. And this is the part that has saved people from disaster. Because if there's an unsatisfied lien on that boat, an unpaid debt secured against the hull, that debt can follow the boat to you. You can buy the boat, hand over your money, and inherit somebody else's unpaid bill attached to the very thing you just bought. The abstract of title is where that ghost shows up in black and white before you sign, while you still have the power to walk away. Think about how this reframes everything I've shown you. The seller controls the listing. The seller controls the fresh paint on the bottom. The seller controls the runs great and the she's all ready to go. But the seller does not control the abstract of title. That record was preserved by a government office that has no stake in whether you buy the boat. It's the one witness in the whole transaction that the seller can't coach. And here's what makes me almost angry about how few people use it. It's not hidden, it's not secret, it's not expensive. It's a public record from the National Vessel Documentation Center, available to anyone willing to look up the boat and ask for it. The truth was there the whole time. The industry just buried it under sunset photos and the word turnkey, and hoped you'd fall in love before you thought to investigate. So here's what you do before you fall in love with the next boat. You get the boat's official documentation number, and you look it up through the Coast Guard system, and you order that abstract of title. You read the ownership history like a detective. You look for the churn, you look for the liens, and you make the seller explain anything that doesn't match the story you were told. Do that, and you've done something almost no first-time buyer does. You've made the boat testify against itself before you've risked a single dollar. Now let me tell you how to put the whole case together, because any one of these checks is good, but all of them together is how you actually protect your savings. Before you make an offer, you pull the abstract of title and read the boat's real history. When you go see the boat, you bring a mallet and you tap that deck and you listen for the thud. You put your hands on the rigging and you hunt for meat hooks and rust and cracks. You look at the hull for blisters and you ask pointedly when it was last hauled and painted and why. And once you're serious, before any money changes hands, you pay for your own survey, your own engine survey, and a $30 oil analysis, because those few $100s are the cheapest insurance you will ever buy against a $30,000 mistake. Every one of those steps is something you can do without trusting a soul. That's the whole point. You don't need to trust the broker. You don't need to trust the seller. You don't need to trust the glossy photos or the reputation on the transom. You replace trust with evidence, and evidence is the only thing that's ever protected a buyer in this business. Because here's the thing I really want you to hear. After everything I've laid out, I'm not telling you not to buy a boat. I sell them. I love them. There is nothing on this earth like being 10 miles offshore under sail with the engine off and the whole ocean to yourself. I'm telling you not to buy the fantasy. The fantasy is the $50,000 sticker and the runs great and the pretty painted bottom and the word turnkey. The fantasy is what empties nest eggs and turns the dream into a slip fee for a boat that never leaves the dock because the owner ran out of money before he ran out of problems. The right boat, bought with your eyes open, checked with your own hands, verified against its own paper trail, can be the best decision of your life. The wrong boat, bought on trust and hope, is a hole in the water you pour your retirement into. The difference between those two boats is not luck. It's not price. It's whether you investigated before you signed. So here's what I want you to sit with tonight. Somewhere near you right now, there is a boat with a fresh coat of bottom paint, an engine that runs great, and a seller who is genuinely hoping you never learn how to tap a deck or pull an abstract of title. And now you know both. You're not the kind of buyer who falls for a sunset photo. If you were, you'd have clicked off 10 minutes ago. You're the kind who wants the evidence before he risks what he spent 30 years building, and that instinct is the single most valuable thing you can bring to a boatyard. So let me ask you something specific, and I actually want you to answer this one. When you tap your deck, or the deck of the next boat you go look at, what did you hear? The sharp knock or the dull thud? Tell me in the comments. And if you've ever pulled an abstract of title and found something the seller left out, I want to hear that story, because your story might save the next person watching. Leave it below. This audience doesn't talk enough, and the comments are where the real evidence gets shared. If this is how you want to buy, with proof instead of hope, then stay with me. This channel exists for buyers who investigate before they trust, who refuse to be handed a fantasy and charged for the privilege. Subscribe and stand with the people who read the paperwork. Because next, I'm opening the case on the one production sailboat brand that everybody recommends to first-time buyers, the safe choice everyone points you toward, and the specific hidden weakness in a whole run of them that no broker will say out loud. You'll want to see that one before you shop again. I've already found the invoices. I'll show you what they cost. This video gave you the overview, but there's more. Inside the Honest Harbor, I take you through the full pre-purchase inspection on your own boat, right where we stopped. Ask me your own questions, and a real person, me, answers you myself. And you won't do it alone, buyers like you are already inside. Just point your phone at the code on screen. Cancel any time with one click, no risk. Now, if owning a boat still calls to you, let me show you the smart way in. In the next video, I'll walk you through 5 boats worth buying used and how to do it without regret. It's starting right here.